Imagine getting a phone call that would change your life forever. You're told to pack up, train fast, and prepare for a war on the other side of the world. That's exactly what happened to thousands of young American soldiers in 1966. They were about to become part of a brand new combat unit, the 199th Light Infantry Brigade, and head straight into the jungle battlefields of Vietnam. This is the untold beginning of their journey, how they formed, trained, and got ready to fight. If you're into real military history told in simple, clear language, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this. The 199th Light Infantry Brigade, separate, was officially activated on June 1, 1966 at Fort Benning, Georgia. This wasn't just any new unit, it was built to be fast, flexible, and able to fight on its own in the roughest conditions. Light infantry meant fewer tanks, more foot soldiers, and a focus on speed and mobility. They were preparing to fight a very different kind of war, one in the jungles of Vietnam, where quick decisions and rapid movement would be key to survival. From day one, the pressure was on. The brigade had only 6 months to train and get fully ready for combat. Everything had to be done fast. Training, organizing, and gathering the right equipment. There was no time to waste. Soldiers were put through intense programs that focused on jungle warfare, ambush tactics, and counterinsurgency, fighting small, hidden enemy groups instead of traditional armies. Every soldier needed to know how to fight, survive, and adapt under pressure. At the same time, logistics teams were hard at work preparing everything the brigade would need. This included light and heavy weapons, radios, trucks, artillery, helicopters, medical supplies, and communication gear. One of their most important tools was the M113 Armored Personnel Carrier, a small, tough vehicle that could carry troops through dangerous areas. Engineers checked, tested, and packed every item for the long trip ahead. By late November, the brigade was put to the test. Inspectors from U.S. Army Command came to Fort Benning to evaluate their readiness. The result? A full green light. The 199th was officially combat ready. After 6 months of non-stop training and preparation, the soldiers and their gear were ready for deployment. The next step in their journey would be much bigger and much more dangerous. Vietnam was calling. It was now December 1966. The 199th Light Infantry Brigade had finished training and had been marked as ready for war. But getting thousands of soldiers, tons of equipment, and an entire combat unit across the world was no simple task. That's when Operation Uniontown began, the official name for the brigade's massive deployment to Vietnam. This mission required careful timing and total coordination. Everything had to move in the right order. The soldiers, their weapons, their vehicles, and all the supplies needed to set up base and fight. Army planners broke the operation into 2 major parts, moving the equipment by sea and flying the troops by air. Heavy cargo, things like armored vehicles, artillery guns, fuel tanks, and thousands of crates of ammunition, was too big or too slow to move by plane. Instead, these were loaded onto large Navy ships at the ports of Savannah and Charleston. These vessels belonged to the Military Sea Transportation Service, or MSTS. For days, cranes lifted vehicles and containers onto the ships. Each item had a specific place and order. The loading crews worked around the clock to make sure nothing was missed. While the ships prepared to sail, troop movement began through the skies. Soldiers were flown out in waves, using aircraft controlled by the Military Airlift Command, or MAC. Some planes were military, others were commercial airliners used for transport. The main destination was Tan Son Nhut Air Base, just outside Saigon. To avoid delays and confusion, the flights were spread out over days and weeks. This made it easier to receive the troops at the air base and move them to their next location in Vietnam. The combination of sea and air travel allowed the entire brigade to stay on schedule. While the cargo ships took longer to cross the Pacific Ocean, the troops could arrive and prepare to receive and organize the equipment once it landed. That way, the soldiers wouldn't be sitting and waiting in dangerous conditions without their gear. By the end of December, most of the 199th Brigade had left the U.S. The operation was working smoothly. There were no major setbacks, no lost cargo, and no serious accidents. Every detail had been planned, from the route the ships would take to the meals served on the planes. But the real challenge was just beginning. The soldiers were heading into a country already deep in war. Their next stop was Vietnam, and they were about to hit the ground running. By the final days of 1966, the first flights carrying soldiers from the 199th Light Infantry Brigade were touching down in South Vietnam. Their landing zone was Tan Son Nhut Air Base, a busy and heavily guarded airport near Saigon. The moment the planes rolled to a stop, the reality of war hit hard. The heat, the noise, the tension in the air, this was no longer training. This was Vietnam. The troops didn't stay at the airbase for long. After grabbing their gear, they were moved by trucks and helicopters to their new area of operations, Long Binh, located northeast of Saigon. This was where the brigade would set up its base and begin its mission. But Long Binh wasn't ready yet. It was mostly open space, hot, dusty, and vulnerable. There were no solid buildings, no defenses, and very little protection from enemy attack. At the same time, their equipment was arriving at ports like Vung Tau, down on the southern coast. Cranes and dock workers unloaded the ships, pulling out tanks, trucks, artillery, fuel, and supplies. Everything had to be checked, sorted, and guarded. Once ready, long convoys, lines of trucks and trailers, carried the equipment through dangerous roads to Long Binh. Armed escorts rode with every shipment. The threat of ambush was always present, even this early in the deployment. Coordination was everything. Units had to link up with their equipment, communication lines had to be set up, and supply chains had to be built from scratch. Soldiers worked long hours in the heat, unloading gear, building tents, and setting up weapons. There was no break, no adjustment period. Everyone knew they had to get the brigade running before the enemy had a chance to strike. By early January 1967, most of the brigade was in country and assembled at Long Binh. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but the 199th was officially on the ground and getting organized. The next task was clear: build a base, protect it, and get ready for combat. Once the 199th Light Infantry Brigade was fully assembled at Long Binh, the soldiers had one job: build a home base, and fast. There was no time to wait for construction crews or perfect plans. They had to turn an open, vulnerable patch of land into a working military camp that could support a full combat brigade. And they had to do it while knowing enemy forces were nearby and possibly watching. The base would soon be named Camp Frenzell-Jones. It was named in honor of two soldiers from the brigade who had already given their lives in Vietnam: Captain Herbert Frenzel and Specialist 4th Class Raymond Jones. Both had been part of the advance team sent to Vietnam before the full unit arrived. They were killed in action while scouting and preparing the area for the brigade's arrival. Naming the camp after them was a tribute and a reminder of the danger ahead. There was no waiting for materials or equipment. Soldiers used what they had and what they could find locally. Military engineers, including the 152nd Engineer Company, led the effort. Bulldozers flattened the ground, and team began setting up rows of tents, sandbags, and temporary structures. Everyone helped: infantrymen, medics, radio operators. No matter your role, you picked up a shovel or hammer and got to work. Within days, the camp began to take shape. Tents were replaced with wooden huts and semi-permanent shelters. Defensive bunkers were dug around the perimeter. Rolls of barbed wire were stretched out to protect against enemy movement. A network of fighting positions and guard posts went up to keep watch day and night. The camp wasn't just a place to sleep. It had to support full-scale military operations. Fuel and ammunition had to be stored safely. There needed to be space for helicopters to land and take off, roads for trucks, and zones for repairing vehicles. Command centers had to be built with power, radios, and map rooms to direct operations. Even food and water systems had to be set up from scratch. Soldiers knew they could be attacked at any time, so security came first. Patrols ran constantly around the area, and every soldier dug their own foxhole or fighting position. Many of them had just arrived in the country, still adjusting to the heat and noise, but there was no choice. If they didn't build it fast, they would be exposed. By the end of the month, Camp Frenzell-Jones was up and running. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. The brigade had a base, and now it was time to fight. Now, with Camp Frenzell-Jones built and the brigade fully on the ground, the 199th Light Infantry Brigade took its place in the larger American military effort in Vietnam. The brigade wasn't operating alone. It was now under the command of 2 Field Force Vietnam, one of the largest U.S. combat headquarters in the country. This group managed all American forces in the 3 Corps Tactical Zone, an important and dangerous area just north and east of Saigon. The 199th's first mission was clear: defend the Long Binh and Bien Hoa military complex. These were 2 of the most important U.S. installations in South Vietnam. Long Binh was a massive logistics base full of warehouses, supply depots, and command posts. Bien Hoa was a major air base. Losing either one would be a major blow to the American war effort. To protect these places, the brigade set up patrol routes around the perimeter. Soldiers went out every day, walking through villages, along roads, and into nearby jungle, to look for signs of enemy activity. These weren't just simple patrols. The Viet Cong often used ambushes, hidden traps, and sniper fire to test new units. It was a constant risk. The brigade also worked closely with South Vietnamese forces, known as the ARVN, Army of the Republic of Vietnam. American and ARVN units ran joint security operations, sharing intelligence, setting up checkpoints, and even launching small missions together. These partnerships weren't always easy, but they were important. The U.S. needed local knowledge and support, and the ARVN needed American firepower and coordination. Back at Camp Frenzell-Jones, command centers buzzed with activity. Radios crackled day and night with reports from patrols, updates from helicopter units, and calls for supplies or reinforcements. The brigade had become part of a much larger machine, one that needed constant communication and fast decisions to respond to enemy threats. For the soldiers of the 199th, this was the moment when things became real. Training was over, camp life was built, and now they were part of the war effort, responsible for protecting a vital piece of South Vietnam. Every patrol, every mission, every movement mattered. The enemy was out there, and the 199th had to stay ready. By mid-January 1967, Operation Uniontown had officially come to an end. What had started months earlier as a complex plan on paper was now a fully completed mission on the ground. The 199th Light Infantry Brigade was no longer just preparing for combat. It was active, in place, and already part of daily operations in Vietnam. Every part of the brigade had arrived. The last flights and ships had delivered their cargo. Trucks, weapons, communications gear, medical supplies, food, and fuel were all accounted for. The soldiers had their equipment, their assignments, and a functioning headquarters. Most importantly, they had begun doing what they came to do: defending key positions and carrying out military operations. Camp Frenzell-Jones was up and running, with defenses in place and supply lines flowing. Patrols were being sent out regularly. Helicopters lifted off from new landing pads. Radios connected the unit to higher command and neighboring forces. It may have looked rough, but the camp was fully functional. The soldiers of the 199th were working in shifts, sleeping in short hours, and living under the constant threat of attack. But they were operational, and they were holding their ground. From the perspective of the U.S. Army, Operation Uniontown was a complete success. It was done on time, with no major delays or losses. The movement of troops and supplies had gone smoothly. The camp had been built quickly, and the brigade had taken over a key mission area without incident. In a war filled with confusion and unexpected setbacks, this operation had been a rare moment of precise planning and smooth execution. But success on paper didn't mean the hard part was over. For the soldiers of the 199th, the real work and real danger was just beginning. The unit had been placed right in the middle of a heavily contested area. It would face ambushes, attacks, and long days in the jungle. Some of the soldiers who had just stepped off the plane would never go home. Operation Uniontown was the beginning. Now, the 199th Light Infantry Brigade was in the war for real. From a blank training ground in Georgia to the humid jungles of Vietnam, the 199th Light Infantry Brigade's journey was fast, intense, and historic. Operation Uniontown showed how the U.S. military could build, prepare, and launch a combat force in just a matter of months, and do it with precision. The brigade's successful arrival and setup in Long Binh was just the beginning of its long, dangerous road in the Vietnam War. The men of the 199th didn't just train to fight. They built their own camp, patrolled unknown roads, and stood guard in a land filled with risk. Operation Uniontown was the launchpad, and from there, the real test of courage began. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story powerful or learned something new, please like the video and subscribe for more real history told simply and clearly. There's more to come. From the front lines, the forgotten moments, and the soldiers who lived through it all. See you next time.